So let's get started. Today we're going to be talking about the 7 principles behind creating psychological safety exercises. So, if you're looking to create more safety in your space, these are the principles to keep in mind when creating those behaviors. Now, these aren't always the easiest things to do in the moment, and there have been plenty of times where I've experienced where these were broken. I used to work at a residential facility for mental health. And I worked with people who had schizophrenia, bipolar, PTSD, the whole gambit. And when I started, I was working with my supervisor at the time, and she is one of the smartest people I have ever met in my entire life. She just has so much knowledge and information. And when I got there, there was a lot of stuff thrown at me, and the onboarding was very quick and not very thorough. And I remember after a couple of months, when I didn't know something, I would go up to her and I would say, "Hey, can you help me with this? I'm not sure how to figure that out." And she would look at me like I was an idiot and just say, "What is wrong with you? You need to know this by now. How do you not know this? You need to start figuring this out." And she would just belittle me. And I remember how just small I felt because of that. And I no longer wanted to bring up anything to her. So I kept a lot of stuff to myself, and there was definitely a lot of mistakes that I made that could have been avoided, but I would have rather gone through the mistake than have to talk to her about anything, which is kind of unfortunate. And it's unfortunate because I'm not the only one who's experienced a lot of that. And so let's dive into the principles that you can follow, that a team can follow to create more psychological safety experiences and exercises. So the first one is really about having curiosity before judgment. When we hear something that we don't like, it is so easy to just be like, "No, that's dumb, that won't work," and shut it down. And a lot of times what happens is our brain is making a very quick assumption. And if you ever read the book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, he was the first psychologist to ever win a Nobel Peace Prize in economics. And he talks about how our brain works in 2 ways. One that's very fast, that makes very quick decisions, which is also really helpful for survival. So if an animal's coming at you, you don't really want to think about it. You want to get out of there. So it's really helpful in a lot of scenarios. And then there's this second part of our brain that's more the slow processing, really working hard to understand. And a lot of us, we will respond to things using that first part of our brain, quick decisions, because we want to just kind of get it done, get it through. The brain's really good at making up stories and kind of putting together a whole story that might not have all the pieces, but it feels complete. So instead of allowing our brains to jump to that judgment right away, take a step back and to be really curious about what's going on. And a great way to exercise that curiosity is to, whatever you disagree with, try to ask the question in that. So, for example, with my old manager, instead of her saying, "You don't, how can you not know that?" say, "Oh, I thought we went over that. Can you tell me a little bit more about why this is something that you don't know? Or why does this feel uncomfortable or elusive to you?" If she came with curiosity rather than judgment right away, it would have been a very different experience. So that's a principle when you're thinking about the different exercises, activities, behaviors in creating a psychological safe space, is to have that curiosity first, and then create the judgment, then make the decisions, then put the structure to it. But that helps people feel a lot more safe and comfortable knowing that this person's going to work to understand me rather than make quick judgments and assess me and kind of throw me to the side. Another principle that we can use when trying to create more safe exercises and space is really separating the person from the problem or the challenge or whatever that may be. So if I come to you and I say, hey, I'm having a challenge with, with X, Y, or Z, instead of saying you need to figure it out, you can say, okay, what's going on with this scenario? Are you not getting enough information? Is there not enough information? Is there not enough clarity in the process? And trying to separate the actual problem from the person. And there's a couple of great ways you could do that, especially when working with a teams. So if let's say we have a problem with onboarding, right? The HR department is having those challenges and not being able to get all the people, which is happening a lot during the pandemic. Um, Instead of saying, hey, you, HR manager, you need to figure this out, take a step back and say, okay, what's going on with our practices that's not working? How can we redo what we're doing to make it a much more effective experience? Do we need to reach out to particular groups of people? Do we need to try different marketing methods for the position? So separating the person from the problem and really just focusing on the problem. If you're in a team meeting, a great way to do it is with a bunch of sticky notes. Right, everyone can write down the different problems, you put them on up, and then you have all the problems there, but it's not tied to any one person. And so I've seen a lot of organizations adopt these methodologies because it helps people feel safe to actually share more of what's going on, because they're not going to be attacked. We're going to be on the same team and attack the problem. So instead of you versus me, it's going to be us versus whatever this situation is. So really working to separate the person from the problem. The next principle I want to talk about is clarity. Clarity, clarity, clarity. A lot of times when I work with organizations, I worked with a nonprofit and a lot of their leadership team was having challenges, and the big issue was that there wasn't clarity around how decisions were made. They didn't have actual clear structure for how decisions were being made. So people felt like their toes were being stepped on, that they weren't being heard, and so on and so forth. So whatever kind of processes you have that people go through, whether it's, if I feel uncomfortable about what someone said, what's the process I could go through to get that rectified? Let's say that I'm feeling really sick and I need some time. What's the process I go through to doing that? Because what happens is, if people don't know the process, they don't know where to go, they start getting more anxiety, they're worried about potentially losing their job, looking dumb, or doing the wrong thing. But if we had a clear structure of, hey, when this happens, here's step A, B, C, and D, then people know, one, that we can talk about whatever this thing is, whether it's about giving and receiving feedback, making decisions, challenging one another. Whenever there's that thing, okay, I know I could do step 1, step 2, step 3, and step 4. And so having that clarity and structure and processes can really reduce the anxieties and get people feeling a lot better. Now, the next thing, that principle around creating these safe exercises and behaviors, is sharing intent. Why are we doing something? Why are we pivoting to a new product or service? Why are we having to now do this more paperwork? Sharing the intent of why we're doing something helps people feel more at ease, because they don't have to work to create stories in the background of the heads. They don't have to feel attacked. They know that it's not anything about them as individuals. It's not anything about them being bad or wrong. And letting them know why we're doing something gives people a sense of ease and calm. And now they know how to show up and what's the reasoning behind what's happening. So that helps people feel a whole lot more comfortable and safe when you're sharing the why, the intent of what it is that we're doing. The next thing that you can do that's really helpful is really looking at the next principle is, are you reinforcing safe and positive behaviors? Where's the reinforcement at, right? So a lot of times the reinforcement are, hey, I made a mistake, so now I'm told I'm bad or wrong, and my manager's yelling at me. So what you're reinforcing is this idea of not sharing because if I do, there's going to be negative consequences. Rather than when someone brings a problem or a challenge, we can say how much we appreciate them being honest. We appreciate them being brave to share these things with us, even though it may feel uncomfortable. So, looking at reinforcing the positive behaviors that we're looking when creating psychological safety and being really mindful. Reinforcement is a big one, and it's done in so many big and small ways. So, look at how are we negatively reinforcing these behaviors and things we don't want, and then how can we positively reinforce these more safe, productive, collaborative behaviors that we are looking for. So really looking at where are you reinforcing behaviors. The next principle that we can talk about here is making sure that everyone has a voice. Now, when I say that, that doesn't mean that everyone needs to talk all day long and all of that. It doesn't mean that everyone gets to make a decision. It just means that everyone gets to share their ideas or their inputs. Now, there's a variety of ways that we can do that. A simple way, again, is going back to the idea of if you're in a team meeting and you want to have everyone's voice heard, well, take a few minutes for people to write down their thoughts about what you can do regarding whatever the meeting is about. So, for example, if you're looking at a service that you're providing to your customers and you're noticing that it's just staying stagnant and you're not getting growth, you're getting good reviews, people love it, but it's not growing, well, if you're having a team meeting about what to do, you can start off by having everyone take some time, write down to themselves on post-it notes what they think might be the problem, or if you're in solution mode, what might be the solution, and then put that up. Now you have the conversation visualized and you have everyone's voice up. Not everyone spoke, but you're still making sure that everybody's heard. So there's a lot of cool different ways that you can make sure that everybody's voice is heard, and it's not necessarily everyone taking 10 minutes to talk one by one, although that can be it. But there are a variety of ways where people's voices can be heard. If people feel like their voices aren't heard, they won't feel engaged in the experience or in the process. They'll kind of wonder, what does it even matter if no one's going to listen to anything I say? What does it matter if I don't even need to be showing up to these meetings because I don't really get to talk, I don't really get to speak. So making sure that everybody's voice is heard. Again, that doesn't mean then everyone makes the decision, right? Whoever has the responsibility of whatever you're working on, that person gets the decision. But it's about people feeling included in the process. And one of the ways that you help create the inclusion is by making sure all the voices are heard. Now, the final thing here about the principles behind creating psychological safety exercises and behaviors and spaces is just being mindful of social cues. How are people responding to this space? Are people actively engaged, or are they pretty disconnected and not speaking at all? Looking at how people respond to things, and you can still do that online, especially if you have the video on Zoom. I know it's a little bit of Zoom fatigue, but that's why you also want to make sure the meeting that you're having is really specific and you have clear outcomes of what you're trying to get out of. But be mindful of tone of voice, right? So one of my favorite statements is, when someone says something, I like to say, I hear you saying you like this idea, but it doesn't feel like you like this idea. So, because sometimes people are saying things, but it's like, how do you feel about that? Yeah, it's good. It's good. You're saying it's good, but it doesn't feel like that you feel like it's good. And so being able to just say that in the space, and that whenever I use that technique, it allows people to be like, well, yeah, and then they start opening up a lot more. So being really mindful of the social cues, how are people's tone, how are their facial expressions, how are they engaging, and being aware of those things so that you can see people where they're at and support them if maybe they need a break, maybe they need to be heard, whatever it may be. But the social cues, the social intelligence, really helps people get heard, and it really helps them feel safe. Google talks about in their research of their 180 teams, one of the main factors they found that was helpful for high performing teams was psychological safety. And one of the big elements was being socially aware to people's cues, body language, how are they feeling in the moment, and being able to address it and talk about it in this space. So these are the 7 principles behind creating psychological safety exercises, behaviors, and this is what you can use when you're thinking about creating those things. And if you're interested to learn more about how to create more safety, how to get people more engaged in meetings, we have a free resource for you. So it's in the link down below. Feel free. It's a free resource, and it's a guide about how to get people more engaged and more open when working with one another. So it's a free download. Click below, and it's yours, no problem. And I really hope this was helpful for you all. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave a comment here. And I just want to say thank you so much and have a great day.